Oh, God. Please.
Dispatch, this is Unit 12. We've got reports of a tiger loose inside the San Francisco Zoo. Repeat, a tiger is out of its enclosure.
Did you say a tiger?
Confirmed. Multiple victims down. One fatality already reported. We need backup and medics now.
Copy that.
All units in the area respond. Contain the perimeter. Keep civilians out.
Oh my God, there's still someone in there with it!
Welcome to True Animal Terrors, where real danger meets real stories. Don't look away.
Christmas Day carries a rhythm all its own. In San Francisco, the air was sharp with winter cold, but it was softened by the glow of lights strung along porches and the smell of roasted turkey drifting through neighborhood windows. Families gathered around living room trees. Children tore into brightly wrapped presents, and laughter spilled into the streets. But only a few miles away, beyond the city's festive hum, another kind of gathering was taking place. Behind the iron gates of the San Francisco Zoo, thousands of visitors drifted through winding pathways, bundled in scarves and jackets, hoping for a holiday memory surrounded by wild creatures. The zoo that afternoon had an almost enchanted atmosphere. Parents pushed strollers past candy-striped kiosks. Couples paused to sip hot cocoa while pointing at flamingos standing motionless in the chill. Cameras flashed against the crisp air, capturing the illusion of safety, that these animals, no matter how ferocious in the wild, could somehow be tamed by walls, moats, and glass. To the casual eye, it was a place of learning, a place of wonder, a place to marvel without fear. Yet beneath that illusion lay something older, something primal. A Siberian tiger named Tatiana paced behind concrete and rock, her amber eyes flickering with the same fire her species had carried through centuries of snowblood and survival. Tatiana was no stranger to whispers. Just a year earlier, she had mauled a zookeeper during a feeding demonstration, lunging with such speed that trainers and visitors alike froze in disbelief. Though the keeper survived, the attack left behind scars both on the woman's arm and in the memories of those who witnessed it. Experts questioned whether Tatiana was too unpredictable to remain on display, whether her enclosure was secure enough to contain her. But she stayed. Behind the exhibit's concrete walls, she became both a prized attraction and a silent warning. The zoo insisted she was safe. The public, reassured by signs and brochures, believed them. At the heart of her world was the Tiger Grotto, a rocky pit surrounded by a dry moat and lined with walls of pale gray concrete. To visitors, it seemed impenetrable, a fortress built to hold one of nature's most dangerous predators. Parents lifted their children to peer over the railing, confident in the barrier between them and the massive striped cat below. But hidden in the measurements of that wall was a critical oversight, one so small it was easy to miss, but large enough to invite catastrophe. The wall stood just 12.5 feet high. On paper, it was tall. To the human eye, it looked secure. But safety standards across the nation required at least 16 feet for tigers, predators capable of leaps as sudden as they were astonishing. That missing 3.5 feet, invisible to the festive crowds, would prove fatal. Among those crowds, on December 25th, were 3 friends. 17-year-old Carlos Sousa Jr. carried himself with the restless energy of a teenager perched between youth and adulthood. He had dreams ahead of him, a family that loved him deeply, and on that holiday he wanted only to laugh, explore, and soak up the joy of the day. At his side were brothers Paul and Kulbir Dhaliwal. Together the trio formed a bond of teasing camaraderie, the kind that made everything seem like an adventure. They wandered through the zoo's winter pathways, talking loudly, joking and pausing to point at the animals tucked behind their enclosures. To passers-by, it was nothing out of the ordinary. 3 young men, loud in the way teenagers often are, their voices echoing over the enclosures. Some witnesses would later recall that the boys lingered near the Tiger Grotto longer than most, their laughter carrying across the pit. Perhaps they were careless, perhaps too bold. Speculation would cloud the truth forever. But what cannot be denied is that in the shadows of that enclosure, Tatiana was watching. "Look at her," one of them may have said, leaning over the railing. "She thinks she's the queen." Their laughter rang out sharp against the cold stone. Another boy whistled a taunting trill that bounced off the walls. A pebble clinked down into the moat. A visitor standing nearby shifted uncomfortably and guided her child away, whispering, "Let's go see the giraffes." Inside the pit, Tatiana's posture changed. She slowed her pacing, her massive head tilting upward, ears rotating toward the sound. Her tail lashed, once a whip crack of agitation. The muscles under her striped coat coiled and released with each step. These were not the movements of a cat at rest, nor of an animal lulled into captivity. They were the subtle cues of a hunter honing her focus. To the boys, it was still a game. To Tatiana, it was instinct sharpening to a point. "Come on, she can't touch us," Carlos said, leaning closer to the edge. His tone was casual, even playful, but his words carried an eerie finality, a dare thrown at nature's oldest boundary. For a moment, their laughter filled the grotto, and to the boys it must have felt like nothing more than mischief. Yet, to others nearby, the atmosphere shifted. The kind of quiet that falls before a storm began to spread, even if no one could name it. Tatiana crouched low, her belly brushing the hard ground, and her eyes never left them. As dusk approached, the mood of the zoo changed. Families began to drift toward the exits, ushering tired children into cars cradling paper cups of cooling coffee. The winter air grew sharper, and the pathways stretched long under the deepening shadows. For most, the day had been uneventful, a holiday spent in harmless wonder. But for Carlos, Paul, and Kolbir, their holiday adventure was about to tip into nightmare. The line between safety and terror was far thinner than they or anyone else imagined. Inside the grotto, Tatiana prowled. She had paced that pit for hours, her paws silent against the hard earth. The missing feet of concrete no longer looked like security to her. They looked like opportunity. To the human eye, the wall seemed absolute. To her, it was a challenge. And predators live to overcome challenges. You are such a patient listener. Let's take a short break here for a knowledge boost. Do tigers hunt alone or in groups? Comment below, love to meet bright minds among us. Around 5 o'clock, as the boys lingered at the edge of the grotto, the air split with a sudden movement. Tatiana launched herself upward, her muscles exploding with force honed by centuries of survival. Claws scraped the wall, hind legs propelled her forward in a bound that looked impossible until it was not. In a single motion, she cleared the barrier. The impossible had become reality. The tiger was free. The boys never saw it coming. One moment they were still laughing, their breath hanging in the cold air, and the next a blur of stripes cut across their world. Witnesses later recalled hearing a guttural growl, deep and primeval, vibrating through the winter night. Tatiana struck first at Carlos, her weight slamming into him like a wrecking ball. He hit the ground hard, his cry piercing the stillness. Paul and Kolbir spun around, frozen in disbelief. Carlos, one of them, shouted, their voices breaking into panic. They grabbed for stone sticks, anything to hurl at the predator, but Tatiana was locked in. Her jaws closed, claws tearing through fabric and flesh. Carlos's scream echoed once more, then was silenced as 350 pounds of fury pinned him to the cold concrete. Visitors in the distance turned their heads, confusion sparking into horror as they heard the cries. Some thought it was a fight between teenagers. Others thought it a prank. But then, the unmistakable sound carried across the zoo, a tiger's roar, raw and primal, vibrating in every chest that heard it. Parents clutched their children and quickened their pace toward the gates. A man fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. Blood darkened the ground as Carlos struggled, then went still. His young life, full of laughter only moments before, was gone in less than a minute. Tatiana lifted her head, her mouth wet with the evidence of her first kill, and turned her amber gaze toward the two surviving brothers. The hunt was not finished. Paul and Kolbir staggered back, their sneakers skidding on the cold pavement. Terror surged through them as Tatiana's massive head swung toward them. "Run!" one of them shouted, his voice breaking into a rasp. They bolted, stumbling through the winding zoo paths that suddenly felt like a labyrinth. Behind them, the low growl of the tiger followed, steady and relentless, not the frantic rush of an animal in panic, but the measured pursuit of a predator that knew her prey had nowhere to hide. Their breaths tore ragged in the night, each inhale stinging in their lungs. Kolbeer clutched his arm, blood soaking through his jacket where Tatiana's claws had ripped him open. Paul dragged him along their shoes, slapping against the damp pavement, leaving streaks of red like breadcrumbs behind them. "Help somebody help us." Their cries echoed across the darkened zoo, but the pathways were nearly deserted now. Families had already gone home, leaving behind only shadows, half-empty soda cups, and the muffled rattle of the wind in the trees. Visitors still inside stopped in confusion as the sounds reached them. Some thought the shouts were drunken mischief, others some cruel prank. But then the sound rolled through the air. Tatiana's roar, guttural and deafening, a primal thunder that no one could mistake. Panic spread instantly. Parents grabbed their children and fled strollers, abandoned drinks spilling onto the pavement. A woman dialed 911, her voice shaking. "There's a tiger loose," she stammered. "It killed someone. Please hurry." The first calls reached dispatchers around 5:08 p.m. Within minutes, police cruisers lit up the San Francisco street sirens, cutting through the winter fog. Officers raced toward the zoo, their radios crackling with chaotic reports. Some said it was a fight. Others insisted a wild animal was involved. Then one call clarified the nightmare. The tiger is out of its cage. Inside the zoo, Paul and Kolbeer pressed forward, exhausted and disoriented. Every corner they turned seemed to lead them deeper into the maze. They clutched each other for balance, their voices hoarse from screaming. Behind them, Tatiana's paws struck the ground in steady rhythm, her amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, her tail lashing with cold intent. She wasn't rushing. She didn't need to. She knew the chase was hers. By 5:10, the first squad cars screeched to a halt outside the gates. Officers spilled out rifles and shotguns in hand. Visitors fled past them, faces pale, some sobbing, some stunned into silence. "Get back, everyone out," an officer barked, pushing through the frightened crowd. Inside the zoo, the sounds were eerily distorted, the echoes of screams, the rustle of trees in the wind, and the low rolling growl of something far too powerful to belong in a city park. The officers advanced deeper flashlights cutting through the shadows. Near the Terrace Cafe, they spotted movement, a pair of figures huddled against the wall. It was the Dhaliwal brothers, covered in blood, trembling, barely able to stand. Their eyes were wide-locked, not on the police, but on the figure pacing only yards away. Tatiana. The tiger moved in circles, her shoulders rolling, her head, low muscles rippling under her striped coat. Her amber eyes glowed in the dim light, never leaving the brothers. She wasn't retreating. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting, preparing for the final strike. The brothers clung to each other, whispering prayers, raising their arms as if to shield themselves. "Please," Paul whispered hoarsely. "Please don't let her." His words broke into a sob. The officers raised their rifles. Time seemed to suspend, stretched thin with tension. One wrong move, 1 second too slow, and the tiger would lunge. Then the silence split. A single shot rang out, then another, then another. The cracks of gunfire echoed off the concrete walls. Tatiana stumbled, twisted, and let out one final roar that rattled through the zoo, a sound of fury, of ancient wilderness breaking against the man-made world. Then her body collapsed onto the pavement still. The silence afterward was suffocating. Only the cries of the brothers and the hiss of police radios broke the air. Officers rushed forward, surrounding the Dhaliwals, pulling them back, checking their wounds. On the ground, Tatiana's massive body lay motionless, her striped coat catching the faint light of the cafe. For a moment, even the officers who had pulled the triggers stood still, staring at the fallen predator with something that looked almost like sorrow. 17-year-old Carlos Sousa Jr. was gone. Pronounced dead at the scene, his body lay near the grotto, torn apart in a way no family could ever prepare for. For his parents, Christmas would never again carry the sound of laughter or the glow of lights. It would forever be the night they lost their son to a roar in the darkness. In their home later, they would recall the call from police that it didn't sound real, that it couldn't be real. But it was. The Dhaliwal brothers were rushed to the hospital. Kolbeer's arms were slashed with deep claw marks. Puncture wounds marked his skull where Tatiana's jaws had closed. Paul bled heavily from his legs, the injuries so severe that doctors later said survival had come down to minutes. They clung to life, but their words to investigators painted a picture of chaos screams echoing through the zoo, the tiger emerging from nowhere, the horrifying realization that the wall they trusted had not been high enough. Investigators swarmed the tiger grotto the following morning. Measuring tape stretched along the concrete walls, flashbulbs popped from cameras, and the findings shocked even seasoned experts. The walls surrounding Tatiana's enclosure measured only 12.5 feet, far lower than the 16-foot minimum recommended nationwide. 3.5 feet. That was all it took to transform an illusion of safety into a night of horror. Then came the controversy. Reports surfaced suggesting the boys may have been taunting the tiger, throwing objects, shouting, perhaps even dangling their legs over the edge of the wall. Some witnesses claimed to have seen it. Others weren't so sure. The Dhaliwals denied it completely. No proof ever emerged, but the shadow of doubt lingered. Did Tatiana snap because she was provoked, or was she simply doing what instinct demanded, hunting, striking, surviving? The press seized on the debate. Was Carlos a victim of negligence? Was Tatiana a victim of arrogance, forced into an enclosure too small, too weak to hold her power? Candlelight vigils appeared outside the zoo. Parents clutched their children tighter, wondering how a holiday outing could dissolve into carnage. The community demanded answers. And experts pointed to the chilling truth: the zoo had failed its most basic responsibility. Adding to the anger was the realization that Tatiana had attacked before. In December 2006, she mauled a zookeeper during a feeding demonstration, clamping down on the woman's arm and dragging her violently. The keeper survived, but the incident should have been a warning. Instead of transferring Tatiana or reinforcing her habitat, the zoo had allowed her to remain. And on Christmas night, that decision proved fatal. For the Sousa family, the grief was immeasurable. Carlos's classmates held vigils, candles flickering against the cold December air. Neighbors dropped flowers at their doorstep, but no sympathy could erase the absence at their dinner table. The silence in his bedroom, the way Christmas lights would forever feel dim. The Dhaliwal brothers, though alive, carried scars deeper than their wounds. Interviews with investigators revealed voices, trembling eyes cast downward. Survivors, yes, but also witnesses to something no teenager should endure: the sudden collision of innocence with raw, unleashed nature. The story spread beyond San Francisco, beyond California, across the world. Headlines screamed of the Christmas tiger attack. Some blamed the zoo, some the boys, some fate itself. But as the debates raged, one truth lingered, sharp and unavoidable: when humans try to cage predators, the danger doesn't vanish. It waits. Carlos's death became more than a tragedy of one night. It became a symbol of the fragile boundary between people and the wild, a reminder that 3.5 feet of missing concrete could alter lives forever. As the sun set again over San Francisco in the days that followed, candles flickered against the cold December air. People searched for words to explain the unexplainable, but one truth echoed louder than all the rest. No cage is strong enough to contain the wild forever. When humans try to bend nature to fit our walls, we forget that survival is written into every heartbeat of a predator. Tatiana was not only a tiger in captivity, she was a reminder that the wild does not disappear when we lock it away. It waits, it watches, and when we fail to respect it, the cost is measured in human lives and in tragedy that lingers long after the roar has faded. If this story of us is about 9 out of 10, subscribe so that we can entertain you more. On the other hand, you find this story ridiculous, comment down below. Please let us know what we can improve to bring you a more enjoyable time on our channel. Your support means the world to us.